I got all my notes here,
Okay.
so that's good. Do you have any questions or anything before we start?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I did enough prep. It's starting to go out the window, but we'll hope it doesn't go all the way out the window.
How much prep did you do?
I just watched the first podcast to get an idea of it, and I also made sure I remembered to do the after podcast message. So
Very nice. Okay, so let's see if I remember how to do this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Flowdown. This is episode 4 of a podcast featuring conversations with Three Rivers students, faculty, and staff. My name is Andrew Marvin. I teach English at Three Rivers, and my guest today is Hyrum Merkley. Hyrum is a computer science major, an aspiring author, a computer programmer, a tabletop game master, and a bibliomaniac. Hyrum, thank you very much for being here.
thank you for having me.
I meant to ask you before we started recording, just out of paranoia, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Yes, I do have a habit of not correcting people, but yes, Hyrum is the pronunciation of my name.
I know I asked you for clarification once years ago, I think shortly after we first met, but you don't see somebody for a long time or you don't say their name for a long time and you start to get paranoid.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
How's your winter going?
It's going good so far. It had a heck of a start going into the semester, but now that I'm kind of getting off that, it's going kind of well. I feel like the winter semester is so much quicker on the treadmill than the summer semester.
Now, when you say winter semester, are you talking about the intersession?
Oh, intersession, sorry.
So do you took classes over the winter?
I did not.
Okay. So you're talking about the kind of the ramp up of the spring.
Yes.
That starts in January.
Yeah, that's a better way of wording that.
I do feel like the spring semester definitely has a different valence than the fall. And I've been thinking, too, that it seems like it just gets real busy real fast. What do you, as a student, what do you feel is the difference in energy maybe between fall and the spring semester?
I feel like the fall semester has a lot more new students, so you have that big burst of people are excited to be on a campus for the first time in forever, where spring, everyone's kind of learned from the previous semester, so I don't know if it's the energy is a little bit simmered in general, but also the winter intersession is a lot shorter than the summer. For someone like me who likes to do a lot of prep time, get all my books in order, make sure I have lists of at least the first week of assignments I need to get due and whatnot. It's less time overall, and plus I like to have my own personal projects, so lots of things overlapping, and it's sometimes difficult. Yeah,
absolutely. I feel like I always say that the fall semester benefits from having back to school energy because you're coming off of summer and it's September, so it's still beautiful outside, and you sort of have that enthusiasm coming off of the summer of going back to school. But the spring, you have I don't want to call it a malaise, but you sort of have the inertia of the holidays. Plus, it's wintertime and it's cold, and you sort of got to go back. And so the springtime, to me, feels like you start low and climb up toward the light of summer.
Yeah.
Whereas fall, you're kind of starting high and slowly descending into darkness. But then you do have the holidays to look forward to.
No, absolutely. That's a very good point.
Thank you. What is your relationship to winter as a season?
So my birthday was January 25th. So
Happy birthday.
That was thank you.
Days ago.
Yeah, 22. And so besides that, it's more, I don't really know how to put it, because it's more everyone's inside, because although I can handle the cold, I've had a family that has historically not wanted to be outside during cold times. So it's just, I associate with being indoors around with a lot of people more often, which seems to be a common basis because a lot of people got sick over the winter. So
yeah, 'tis the season. I think the seasonal affective disorder is a real thing, but in recent years I've tried to like the winter. I've tried to enjoy it for what it is, and I do I think I would certainly prefer to be chilly rather than sweating.
Absolutely. I like to put it, there's only so much clothes you can take off before it's no longer socially acceptable, whereas you can put on as much layers as you want.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And plus, I have very long hair, and that works better in the winter than it does the summer.
Yeah, definitely. So I try to enjoy the winter for what it is in terms of, it's crispy, and I found a great article, probably a couple years ago at this point, that I'll try to find for the show notes, but it was sort of it was like a piece of journalism talking to some demographic of people that live like way up north, just in like a climate where it's always winter effectively.
Oh, yeah.
And the piece was kind of investigating how do you deal with that, with it being winter all the time? How do you not get depressed, when there's X amount of sunlight, compared to what we might have down here. And I don't remember the specifics, but the gist that I took away from it was that those people were just sort of like, why would we be depressed just because it's cold outside? Which kind of really resonated with me. Not to say that, again, the seasonal affective disorder, I think, is a real thing. But, you can't change the weather. You can only change how you deal with it.
Absolutely. It's all a matter of perspective. And up there in like Canada, Alaska, where it's like sometimes, it's literally half of the year it doesn't become fully night. And then the other half, it's always night. So that must be very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's always sort of stuck with me. Just it's temporary in the wintertime. And despite the fact that I think I have trained myself to enjoy it, I think it does still weigh on me, on kind of a subconscious level, just because I do find myself moving more slowly and wanting to sleep more. But I think that's what winter's for.
Yeah, especially because I'm a big hiker and 10,000 steps a day person.
Good for
and
you.
It's a lot harder to do that in the winter because I will literally walk up the kind of hill mountain area behind my house, go maybe like 1,000 or so steps, realize it's way too cold. I am not enjoying this, and double right back.
Yeah.
It's not fun. Good
for you. My fiance is a 10,000 steps a day person. I really struggle with doing that. I would love to be a 10,000 steps a day person, but I just it's very hard for me to do. Not to say that it's not difficult for you either as a discipline, but I think in the wintertime, they say that getting outside is even more important in the wintertime, even though we want to hunker down. With the new year, because we're recording in January, this episode will probably be out in February if all goes according to plan. Do you assign any value to the new year?
In recent years, no. I was a lot more optimistic as a kid, but recent years, especially, I know 2020, I legitimately was playing the Final Countdown, and the Final Countdown main riff hit at 2020. I was like, it's going to be a good year. And then 2020 was 2020.
Yeah.
So after that, I've been cautiously optimistic, but I do use it as an opportunity to kind of redefine my goals. My main goal, I kind of mentioned it in the podcast quiz form. Sorry, not
There's
quiz.
no quiz, don't worry,
Yeah,
folks.
it's like, oh no, I'm being graded. So unfortunate. I really wanted to complete my book, and the thing that's really I've hit a barrier with in the past is the publishing process is probably the single most daunting thing for me, because even when I got something that was a passable project for me and I had it with my mother and some of my friends that would actually read the book, went over it fundamentally works pretty well. It's just getting that next level of actually going to a publisher, which just is incredibly daunting for me. And I imagine it's similar for the music industry and other forms of publishing, video game industry. It must be very daunting going to that part.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, at that point, it's got to be a real state of vulnerability to share something that you've spent so much time on with somebody who is completely neutral in the sense of they're not a friend or family member. So yeah, I can't imagine the stress level of that. But so for you, there is a kind of significance to January 1st in terms of redefining your priorities, you said.
Yes, more, I'd say I'd give more gravity towards my birthday than January 1st, but it's such a close band together, 1st to 25th, that it almost blends into one. I like to view January 1st is when I should start prepping my ideas, and when January 25th is where I should start enacting them.
That's cool. That's handy because your birthday is so close to the new year.
Yeah.
My theory which I've only arrived at in the past year or so, is because the couple podcasts that I listen to are pretty down on the traditional cliche New Year's resolution type thing. You know, and I get the numerical significance of January 1st, you know, which is cool. Yeah. But my theory that I just started implementing this past year is that January is not the time to reinvent yourself, because and obviously it's different for everybody, but January doesn't feel like the right time for me because, like I said, my energy is sort of in a trough in January. You know, you're recovering from the holiday diet, and it's cold, and I feel like it's harder to get motivated. And so for me, I'm starting to treat September as the time for reinvention, because you're coming off of that summertime where you've had significantly more downtime, at least for those of us in academia.
Oh, yeah.
And then coming out of the summertime, and summertime is not real life, you know, it's an anomaly, you know, and then coming back to school in September always feels like a return to real life. And so I think for me, enacting a significant change or improvement in September feels right. And then when you go into the holidays, you've already got 3 or 4 months under your belt of self-improvement. So I don't know, that's sort of been working for me lately.
Yeah, I think that's a better idea overall. Just like move to Australia, because that's pretty much how seasons work down there anyway.
Oh, well, there you go. See, I didn't even think of that. I don't think about Australia enough other than its dangerousness. Everything will kill you is the meme.
Even the kangaroos will get you. They'll get you.
Yeah.
I'm not even kidding.
Kick to the face. Tell me a little bit about your path to Three Rivers and what led you here.
I have a bit of a wild path, honestly, because I was thinking about it the other day. I was born in Utah and kind of went through the education system there, and being the person I am and growing up in Utah was a little bit of a contrast, because the way I view the world is a lot different than a lot of people in Utah will, to not go into too much detail on that. And I was then in the military academy, and then I moved to Europe because of my dad's job. And then I'm a 2020 graduate, so that was the pandemic. And I was looking back on it, like, I struggled in high school because of ADHD and autism. Just like, I would succeed on almost every test, but I was not a homework person. Like, it didn't have any incentive to me. So then 2020, I got stuck in Europe because all the planes shut down because of COVID and all of that. So I got lucky enough to get a job as a paraprofessional and assistant librarian at the school I graduated from, which was a very awesome experience for me. I got to be a teacher as well as work in the library, which was very fun. And then 2021, I'm back in school, which I feel like the gap year definitely helped give me a break. Like, I did have a fear that when I got back on the treadmill, especially because I did have a rough 2020 academic year outside of AP courses, because that's so focused on the test that it works right into my style, that I would run into the same mistakes I did in high school. But I feel like the freedom of college has actually helped me. Like, there's less rigid guidelines in college, at least with most professors I've found in the college. Like, take your writing classes, for example. The amount of freedom I got in those, like, genuinely helped me. And as well as the history class I took last semester with Peter Patsaurus, his mid-paper was a creative writing assignment, and I think that's the single most fun I've had on the project my entirety of school here.
That's so cool. So when you say 2020 graduate, that was high school?
Yes.
Right, okay.
I graduated COVID year.
Awesome. And when you say the freedom of college, I think that, you know, I'm a fairly interested in advising as far as faculty members go. And one of the things that we frequently talk about in advising is sort of the shock in transitioning from the really rigid structure, as far as I remember, of high school to the freedom of college. And so I think a lot of students really struggle with that adjustment because there is, I don't want to say less accountability, but in some ways there is less accountability because it's not like going from room to room. And I appreciate you felt like there was freedom in the class that... Which classes did we have together?
Technical writing and poetry. Technical
writing and poetry. Okay, good. Those are the two rarer of the Mr. Marvin experiences.
It was definitely wild because, oh gosh, I still remember my technical writing paper.
Yeah.
I wrote on the video game industry and how bad bad some of the worker treatment is with crunch time and the blizzard situation, which is a very upsetting incident if you want to go into detail on that. But
yeah, weren't there just layoffs? More layoffs?
Oh, yeah, recently, yeah. Like, the video game industry has been, like, pummeled with layoffs recently. It's a little upsetting, to put it lightly.
Tough times for everybody.
Yeah.
When you say you found a lot of freedom in my writing classes, that surprised me a little bit, because I do feel like some aspects of my course are very, very rigid and very structured, and I do intentionally try to provide that for students. So what was the freedom for you in those classes?
It's weird because I feel like it's a little bit of an oxymoron, because I like having structured like outlines, like everything on your syllabus with especially the poetry journal, even though I kind of got behind on it with like, you want to finish these amount of words for this week. Like that helps me out a lot. But the freedom with like major projects, like my poetry final, I just decided I would include Beowulf in it because I was really fascinated with the etymology of words at the time, and still very much am. So like the ability to kind of go off the rails a little bit with my papers, that was very fulfilling, honestly.
I'm glad to hear that. And I do remember the Beowulf. Very brave. I think I do try to provide that balance between the structure and the freedom. And I think I remember talking about this with Shay at the beginning of the show, you know, in the sense of providing structure in terms of what the assignment needs to do, but not telling you what you need to write about, because I do want you to have the creative freedom to pursue the topics that you're most interested in. What's it like in Utah?
Different. So Utah is honestly a really wild place comparatively to Connecticut. So, I don't even know where to begin, because it's a desert, but the weather's always insane. The people there are mostly the older generation. I definitely experienced with the younger people more my age, a lot of different opinions, but it's very Mormon culture. And a lot of that leads to decisions being made by the lawmakers that are interesting. I'll put interesting there to not cause controversy.
Sure. So when you say it's a desert, what is the climate like in Utah?
So,
is it cold most of the time?
It's weird because it has very hot summers.
Okay.
There was a drought briefly, and then it had massive snowstorms for a while. It gets wicked. So not quite Midwest like Illinois area like wicked winters, but still some pretty sizable winters, which is a little bit weird because like desert, but snows a lot. And also there's big mountains.
Yeah, that's what I associate with Utah, I think. There's got to be a good skiing scene out there, right?
It's massive. They had the Winter Olympics and won't shut up about the fact that they had the Winter Olympics. 2002, I think, my birth year. So
did you say that you grew up in Utah, born and raised, or you were just there for a bit?
Up until 15.
15, okay, so formative years.
Yeah.
Nice. Do we miss it? Do we go back?
Oh, that's a very loaded question. I feel like I do like Utah as a state itself because I'm a big like traverser and hiking. I do have like memories of visiting some of those national parks in Moab especially. I feel like it would be awesome to be able to hike there. But a lot of the friends that I had in Utah, I feel like I grew up in a different direction than them. So I feel like I not acclimate well to that environment as well, whereas I feel like I'm kind of better acclimated here, honestly.
Yeah, got it. So then you were in Europe when the pandemic hit.
Yes.
Where in Europe?
Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is in the Balkans.
Yes.
It's right above Greece, essentially.
Okay. And you were there in that specific location because your family was there at the time?
Yeah, my dad's job.
Got it. Okay. What's it like in the Balkans?
Lots of mountains. It gets very polluted during the winters because it's like literally a dome, and since they have a bunch of like coal plants everywhere, like the smoke has nowhere to escape and it becomes like a bowl of soup. It can be sometimes volatile among certain ethnic groups in the Balkans. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but like the Yugoslav wars right before I was born essentially were very, very volatile, and there are still a lot of ill will in that area between certain groups, and it's definitely an interesting experience, to put it lightly.
Sure.
But not bad.
Okay. Utah and the Balkans, two geographic locations that I have not visited. Do you feel like, or in what ways has visiting those areas changed your perspective on anything?
Oh, that's tough. It definitely has, but I'm just trying to like put the right words of how exactly. Like people, I think Europe more so than Utah, like my perspective of, oh, this is how people deal with the things over here. And here's how people perceive me because I came from over here. And it's always fascinating watching how people perceive the world and perceive the idea of America without like actually living in America. And I feel like it's sometimes a bit of a shock when people actually get into America, like, oh my gosh, it costs so much money around here. Whereas there's something called the Burger Mac Index of like how much something will cost in one country compared to the other. Like everything's a lot cheaper over there, whereas America, it's like money.
Yeah. So is the perspective over there, is it sort of more idealistic than what we know is the reality?
Very idealistic. I know when I lived in Kosovo, people would literally come up to me like, wow, you're from U.S., dream of mine to go to New York. And it's almost like fangirling over it. It's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, I've actually been there. It's probably an experience if you go there for like a one-time visit, but I almost feel like since I've lived in it so long, it's almost like a numbing experience.
Yeah.
Like Novocaine.
Right. So you're a well-traveled guy.
Yeah, somewhat, I'd say. I've definitely been around Europe.
Yeah.
Which Scotland was fun.
That's cool. I would love to go to Scotland. My family and I did go to Dublin.
Oh, nice.
One year, and it was actually in January. And one would think, why would one go to Ireland in January? But apparently January is typically pretty mild in Ireland. But when we went, this must have been like 2010 maybe, they had like the coldest winter on record in Dublin, which was the equivalent of like 2 inches of snow, and they did not know what to do. Like we landed in the Dublin airport and we had to sit on the tarmac for a long time while a bulldozer shoveled some slush. So they like didn't have shovels, like literally. So that was kind of an interesting cultural experience, but I would love to get to Europe more. I wanted to ask you about, and feel free to not answer this, because obviously you don't have to talk about anything you're not comfortable with, but I feel like you and I are or were the last bastion of masking for a while at the tail end of this pandemic. And I don't know if you're still wearing yours, but I know that being in classes together, I know that it certainly seemed like we kind of persisted a little bit with the masks a little bit longer than most folks did. Was it difficult for you to do something that almost nobody else is doing?
Sometimes, because it's very rare. Some people do like to make comments on that to my face, and I tend not to care too much. I still do, but I literally ran out, and I'm waiting for Jeff Bezos to give me my next batch of KN95 masks. It kind of is, but at the same time, I know why I'm doing it is for my personal safety, as well as I live with my grandparents, so I also have to be very aware of that as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I make the choice to keep that on most of the times. Like, sometimes when I feel like I'm not around a big group of people, I won't wear it. But if I'm in the gym sometimes, I'll have it on. But if I'm alone in the gyms, it's off. It's all about, like, the environment, I think, is where I keep it in. And some people like to make comments, but it's...
Yeah, I've encountered very few comments. I mean, sometimes people point it out. Often, like here on campus, it's usually in a complimentary way. Like, good for you, for hanging in there. And obviously, everybody should do what makes them feel comfortable, as we do. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I know a lot of people. It's physically uncomfortable. It's not a comfortable thing. It feels claustrophobic, something like that. Figure for me, it's relatively easy. Even teaching with it. I mean, it's not as easy as not teaching with a mask.
You have to project a bit more. Yeah.
You got to project a little bit.
And
more.
I definitely noticed that because one time we were setting up for an event for our office student programs, and I took my mask off briefly because someone couldn't hear me, and I didn't realize, but I pretty much shouted at the person because I'm used to projecting so much with my mask on.
Yeah, I fear that if and when I take my mask off in the classroom, that I'm just going to blast everybody's eardrums.
Just boom.
Yeah, and I feel like my projection's pretty good to begin with. That phrase, just notwithstanding, that I just tried to pronounce. Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I made it to August 2023 without getting COVID, and my fiance still hasn't had it because she works from home. And so I don't want to bring anything home to her, obviously. And, my COVID experience, fortunately, knock on wood, was not a huge deal. I had a fever for 2 or 3 days, felt crappy for 3 or 4 days, but I was positive for 10 days. And so I lived in our guest bedroom to keep her from getting sick for 10 days. And going forward, hopefully, I wouldn't be positive for 10 days if I got it again or when I get it again. But I just can't afford to be off the reservation for 10 days. That's a lot of time to sacrifice.
Yeah, I got very lucky when I got it this fall because I definitely got in my history class because someone was coughing next to me and I was like, oh no, I might get sick, aren't I? And then I do. And luckily I got well right before when I could get back into class again. And
yes.
I was like, that was so lucky.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. That's how I felt because I got it in August. So I was in the clear, right before classes started. But yeah, I mean, speaking about trying to stay motivated over the summer.
It's like, damn it.
Yeah, not happening, having COVID in August. I appreciate you sharing that. I just thought it was sort of a common thread between us. So, but it's getting better out there a little bit. Knock on wood. Everybody be careful. Let's see. So I want to talk a little bit more about what you're doing here at Three Rivers. So you're a computer science major, and you also identified yourself as a computer programmer. So what is it? What I guess drives you toward computer science? What is it about the field that speaks to you?
So I just really love creating things as well as writing novels and whatnot. My original plan was to go for creative writing, but I figured that going for software engineering would give me a better base with things because I feel like there's an incredible amount of resources to learn online for both computer science and creative writing. But I feel it might be better to have a degree in creative writing, degree in computer science overall. And there's also a little bit of pressure from my family, but I very much enjoy doing it. I like when I can create programs that do dumb things, even if it's a program that literally breaks itself. And the amount of times that a friend will be just doing something when we're on a call and I'll be like, I can make a program to calculate that. And I make a program and it does the thing. And I feel so proud of myself.
That's cool. Where does that familial pressure come from? Do you come from a family of computer scientists?
No. To put it, I wonder if my mom's going to see this. I doubt she will, but it was essentially like, it's kind of happening to my sibling as well, where they're kind of going, don't get a English degree, get this degree because it'll make you more money. And I'm like, I probably should care more about money, but I kind of just care about doing what I'm doing. And that's why I'm trying to encourage my sibling, just stick with what you want to do. Like, I do want to do computer science. It's not like I'm truly pressured. Like, if I did feel pressured, it would reflect in how I perform in school, so
you do see computer science versus creative writing as being, I think it's a classic conflict that I know I certainly went through, but kind of a dichotomy between the practical, career-oriented, how will I be able to eat sort of choice when it comes to major versus the more perhaps slightly fulfilling, but maybe slightly quote-unquote less practical, according to some people, path.
Yeah, it's a bit of a gamble, unfortunately. It is what it is.
Yeah, but you like computer science.
I do.
And you feel good about it. When I got to Sacred Heart University, we had just gotten the Jack Welch College of Business, which part of my brain was like, maybe this is a sign that I should get a business degree and, have a very lucrative career. And it took me until halfway through my sophomore year before I even declared my major, which was English. And so I went through it, and I think a lot of people go through it. But for me, it was really about, first of all, I took a lot of courses and tried a lot of courses that were not good for my GPA. Like, marketing was super interesting, microeconomics, macroeconomics, like interesting stuff, but definitely not anything that I felt particularly skilled at.
Yeah.
And my English classes, not only did I do better in those classes, but it was also sort of the type of people that I gravitated toward. You know, the kinds of classmates that I was surrounded by, but also the kinds of professors that I found myself annoying and irritating on a regular basis. I think that's a useful metric, or can be a useful metric, because what kind of people do you want to surround yourself with? What, sort of the contrary to that point, what similarities do you see between creative writing and computer science? Because they seem kind of antithetical in some ways.
The way I like to kind of rationalize it, and I talk about a lot with people, is it's both about creating things, essentially. People don't realize how structured creative writing can be, even though it is relatively free. It's creative, but you always want to have like foreshadowing, the buildup of plot, essentially. Creating a program, although not as intricate as that, is kind of like that. You create something, everything has to have a purpose within the program, and if it doesn't have a purpose, you have to defend why is it here, or can it be useful in the future for a later project. And I do think they're comparable, even though vastly different fields. It's kind of like that. They're both like language-esque, but not entirely. One's not entirely human language, and one's not entirely computer language.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. I think the writing process is just a series of tiny decisions, and you have to, if you're going to put this in, you need to be able to justify it. It's the same way with a paragraph as opposed to a computer program, I would imagine. So, as a computer scientist, does that mean do you have a favorite programming language, or what is that? What's kind of your area?
My best by a mile is Java, which is because I used to code a ton of Minecraft mods for sheer fun, and also it was the language I used for my AP computer science class. So I got very familiar with it. I'd say I'm adept with a good bit of languages, but Java definitely is my best. The first one I actually learned was C++, which is very rare because C++ is one of the more difficult languages before you get into assembly and machine language, which I'm probably saying a bunch of words here.
That's okay. I took some kind of computer course, but I think it was Visual Basic or something that we learned at the time, and that was like high school. But I'm always drawn to the idea of, which is kind of interesting now that I think about it, because I'm not like a sports guy, and so I don't really subscribe to that kind of tribalism. But people, I think, feel strongly about different programming languages, and different kinds of people are drawn to different kinds of programming languages. You know, like people that are into Python are really passionate about Python, but people that are into Ruby are way into that. What is it about Java for you that feels the most Hyrum-esque?
The main reason why is Java kind of has a lot more structure than Python does. Like, I know people love Python that love Python, but the fact that Python doesn't have semicolons and relies solely on indents to making sure your program doesn't blow itself up, that is not great for me. And plus, the programs that allow use of Java, I just have a little bit more luck with, because Visual Studio sometimes Visual Studio just does not want to exist for C++. So I feel like Eclipse, which is one of Java's engines, has like a lot more ease of use than that, with the exception of FX stuff, which is creating applications for Java. It's just like a little bit more, I'm trying to find the right word, a little bit more structured than Python, where there's rules that you have to follow that can cause your program to work. Like, Python ignores some things that other programming languages do that make it sometimes easy to break Python. Like, it's almost like Python's a little bit too easy. Whereas C++, I just struggle with the programs that involve C++, which I can probably work around, but we'll see.
So to put this in sort of concrete, practical terms for those of us that are not computer scientists, what kind of programs does one make with Java?
Java, you can make applications, games. It's C++ and Java are the two most common languages, and C# for game development. A little bit of back-end design for databases and websites. So for some websites that have like enter your information, your username and password, all that stuff will be in either a Java database, in an Oracle database, or it will be in a SQL database, which that's another language, SQL. But yeah, that's what Java's mostly used for, as well as like basic applications. Like I'm blanking on some other examples, but pretty much that.
Is there a program that you've made that you rely on like a daily basis?
Briefly, yes. I created a little program that would allow me to essentially just prioritize things, essentially. So there's something in software engineering called a decision analysis resolution, which is essentially you assign a bunch of variables of something a ranking, and then you decide what is the best option to do based off of that ranking. So sometimes I will schedule myself with it. It's very old. I don't use it anymore because I just preferred creating an Excel spreadsheet of my schedule, essentially. So that was like the closest I got to relying on a program, but...
That's cool, though. I'm sure there's a lot of repetitive tasks that I do that could be automated, but I just lack the ability to automate them. I wanted to, speaking sort of along those lines of organization or productivity, you strike me, I haven't looked at your transcript or anything, but you strike me as a successful student. What sort of systems or values do you hold yourself to help you stay organized or stay productive, or what helps you to kind of stay on top of everything that you have going on?
I create a bunch of lists every week, essentially. Like, I literally have a notebook, and I put sticky notes for every single subject, and I literally list off every single assignment for the week, and I just check off that box. The reason I do that is because I know a lot of people struggle with like the world being a world of instant gratification. So when you turn in an assignment, you don't immediately know what you got for it, like a discussion post or essay. You don't know what you got on it. So checking off that box that I did this helps me rationalize that, like, okay, you did good. Now just wait for the assignment to be graded. And as well as like just making sure I have all the supplies I need going into the semester. It's mostly just books, but sometimes it's getting notebooks for each class and all that.
Yeah. So you're a list guy.
Yes.
And do you may have just said this, but do you operate kind of like on a weekly basis where you kind of like at the beginning of the week, you always look at, all right, here's everything that needs to be accomplished this week, or is there a different list for a different class or areas of your life?
It's mostly weekly. Some stuff does cascade because one of my classes, everything is due Thursday. One of them, everything's due Friday. One of them's everything's due Wednesday. So I have to like kind of change my list based off of that. But that's like the only difference.
I think there's really something to what you just described about checking things off, because a lot of times, especially because we do so much of our work digitally now, and this is one reason why my course outlines are sort of designed the way they are, it makes it a little bit more concrete when you put it on paper. And I think we were talking about this maybe even before I hit record, but the act of, I think you called it a second brain, which is something I just heard, for the 100th time on a podcast, because it's a concept I think about a lot. But having that sort of concrete artifact, whether it's just an item on a list, really helps to get that thing out of your head and prevents you from having to remember it. Yeah. Because you don't have to remember it because it's there on the page.
100%. Yeah. There's so much things in your brain. It's constantly shifting. There's so many things you have to worry about. And it's good to, if something's important, get it on a sheet because it's out of your brain and it can exist there and you can go back to it. It's helpful.
Yes. Is that something you discovered yourself? Because that really resonates with me as something that I think about constantly and live by constantly. Is that something that you sort of discovered on your own, or did you learn that at some point?
I actually kind of came to that conclusion myself. I didn't really check on too much stuff. I just was kind of going off of what worked best for me. Like, do I want to set up like specific times for everything, or do I want to have a checkbox? And I figured having a checkbox was better because it also incentivizes me to like check off the box as soon as possible. So I do the assignment soon and then I have free time later, rather than I have free time now and then the dread of not handing in the assignment is hitting me later.
Yeah, so crucial. My yoga teacher said once that a lot of times people say that they want to learn to meditate so they can turn their brain off, quote unquote. And she said that doesn't make any sense because the brain's job is to think. You can't really turn your brain off. And the value of meditation is to practice thinking about one thing for a couple of minutes or longer, which always really resonated with me as well. But yeah, I mean, there's just, again, because the brain's job is to think, it just endlessly comes up with things, to say nothing of what life throws at you. All life does is give you things that you need to do or want to do or have to do. And so, there is a finite amount of space, I think, in the brain. We think of it as like, the brain is this abstract, infinite, space or wealth of knowledge. But you get too much stuff up there and things start crashing into each other, which is, I think, where stress and overwhelm kind of comes into play. So I'm all about getting it out of the head and onto 100%. The page. You're a video game person.
Oh, yes.
What kind of video games?
So I'm also a big reader, so narrative-heavy games have been my jam, mostly. It's been a while since I've owned a console, so I'm mostly a PC gamer, too. I mentioned, I've been on a real kick of CRPGs, which is computer RPGs like Divinity Original Sin 2 and Baldur's Gate 3. Those have been incredible games recently that I very much enjoyed.
Game of the year, that Baldur's Gate 3, I believe.
Yeah, it is. Oh, there's a really funny clip of it with Todd Howard in the background of the dude announcing Baldur's Gate 3 wins this, Baldur's Gate 3, and Todd Howard's like, because Starfield got one thing, I think.
I think I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, but I'm familiar with Diablo and things like that. Baldur's Gate 3 is turn-based, though.
Yes.
Right?
It's based off of the Dungeons and Dragons system.
Okay. So because I'm struggling, when I think of Baldur's Gate 3, and maybe I'm just thinking of earlier installments, I'm thinking about sort of the isometric Diablo sort of point of view.
Yes.
So is that how it is, and how does that mesh with the turn-based paradigm?
So it's isometric point of view. You click the mouse to move your character everywhere, and you run into encounters that are combat and they have a turn-based system, or you can run into NPCs and just have a chat with them, essentially. And then certain social situations require you to be able to make a dice check, and the game rolls internally like a 1 in 20 chance, essentially. And if you roll 1 on the dice, you automatically fail. 20, it's a automatic success. And then combat works similar. And then there's so many layers so it's difficult to fully describe.
Yeah, for sure.
Very much enjoy it.
Does it successfully capture the essence or the spirit of Dungeons and Dragons?
I'd say mostly. It's hard. It's really hard to get a one-to-one replica of Dungeons and Dragons just because of how much freedom is in Dungeons and Dragons, but it gets very close. There's a point in the game where it just lets you lick a spider corpse, which is, if you want to do that, you want to do that.
Yeah, people are into what they're into. With Dungeons and Dragons, which I've never played, despite being a fantasy guy of a sort as well, I know the community is a big aspect, and the camaraderie of playing Dungeons and Dragons in person is big. Does Baldur's Gate manage to emulate or capture that somehow? I imagine you can play multiplayer.
Yes, it does have multiplayer abilities. There are a lot of shenanigans doing multiplayer run-throughs. And when you're doing a single-player run-through even, a lot of the characters in the game are very well written. So people like to have traumatic backstories for their D&D characters, and a lot of the storylines you can go through, you have a lot of freedom of how you end up affecting these characters. Some characters, depending on how you play the game in an evil or good way, how they end up by the end of the game is completely different. That's why there's nearly 1,500 endings to the game, because there's 6 origin characters and there's an additional 7th that is only a player character. And depending on how you do the quests in the game and how you interact with them, you can end up in so many different positions, and that very much does capture a lot of the character and role-playing aspect of Dungeons and Dragons, because that's what people resonate with so much, is incredible stories, being able to live a life that they actually don't have and experience something entirely different in life, and it's really magical.
Yeah, that speaks to me too. I remember in my younger years reading fantasy or playing RPGs and always feeling like, oh, this world is so much more exciting than my own. But, you know.
Yeah, it's like Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. What, for those that don't know, what is a dungeon master or game master responsible for in these kinds of things?
You're essentially God. So the dungeon master essentially creates the entire world, or in the case of pre-made campaigns, will run from a module. And essentially your job is to kind of control every enemy that the party will face, which the party is played by player characters, as well as basically enact every single NPC in the game. This can be very varying in terms of how hard people go. Like, I know Matthew Mercer is very hardcore in his Dungeon Master skills, and I also like to voice act a lot when playing Dungeons & Dragons, so as a game master, I like to pretty much have everything role-played in a hyper-specific way. And it can be that degree, or it can be like simply, oh, the person says this to you and explains it's this way. Like, there's lots of it's lots of freedom, but essentially you are the game.
Wow. That sounds like a lot of responsibility, but also a lot of reward for you.
Oh, yeah. I've had I know my previous campaign I had an entire notebook of the entire world. What happens if they don't complete this event by this day? The consequences. I love creative writing, and D&D is perfect for that because I also love world building as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that must tie in perfectly to your need to write creatively.
Yeah.
That's great.
Big time sink, it's worth it. Even if they don't find everything, it's still worth it.
Yeah, awesome. You mentioned that one of the things that you struggle with is burnout and making use of free time because of burnout. Tell me a little bit about that.
So when I feel I can't do anything anymore, I don't know how to describe it because my brain feels like it's not there anymore, essentially. And when I finally have free time after doing a bunch of assignments or a bunch of work for my work, I feel like I can't do anything, so I have to physically lay down and do nothing to recharge. It's literally like my battery has expended and I need to get it back up. It happens in social situations. I'm a massive introvert. I can hide it well, but after I'm done with the situation, I need a recharge for sometimes even weeks.
Yep. That's why I'm going to close the door after you leave.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I think it's almost paradoxical because it seems like, how is it difficult to really leverage your free time? But I think you're right that, we're all so busy and occupied all the time that when you have free time, it can be sort of either overwhelming to decide how should I spend this free hour or half hour that I have, and I think that's because you kind of don't have any willpower to decide. And so I know for me, that's when a lot of YouTube consumption sort of happens inadvertently.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's such a rabbit hole. There's so much stuff there. There's a YouTube channel I got hooked on called Tier Zoo that literally just treats animals like it's a video game, ranking them based off of parameters, and there's a meta. It was really fun. Shay actually got me into that, which is funny. And also, because it's I can either go on YouTube, I can do some of my personal projects, which I do enjoy doing, or I can play video games with my friends. And most of the time it's play video games with friends because, yeah.
Well, it's rewarding in its way as well.
Yeah.
But I've totally been there where it's you don't have any willpower left to decide what might feel like a more productive choice for your free time. And you're right that there's just so much on YouTube, and there's a lot of it's really valuable. When I was rowing this morning before I came here, I was watching something on YouTube while doing that. And the thing that I was watching is something I really value and really take a lot of joy in consuming. But I've also been thinking, particularly just this semester, just how often I'm receiving an input, because I feel like it's almost the default, because I'm always, quote unquote, always listening to a podcast or watching something on YouTube or reading a book even, or listening to an album. And again, all of those things that I'm consuming, all of those inputs are valuable to me, things that I enjoy. So I don't think they're inherently evil or harmful or anything like that, but I do wonder, to what degree am I a little bit deficient in minutes or hours where I am not receiving input from something?
You know, it's a very difficult slope to navigate, I think, too, because I know something I've got recommended is like set specific hours to where you can like have that free time. But then again, like if something is a little bit over time, like you accidentally tabbed onto like a 44-minute video talking about tropes in literature, I want to finish that. So then you go over time and then you feel bad about going over time. And then that spirals from there and there. And it's like, wow.
The time is so finite.
Yeah. 24 hours in a day does not feel long enough. And you're supposed to sleep half the time.
I know.
And like, no, I don't want to sleep.
Who's got the time? You mentioned earlier ADHD and autism.
Yes.
What is it like, sort of on a, if you can, in terms of like on a daily basis? How do those things affect your life or the way that you move through the world?
A lot, quite frankly. I'll kind of like go into two steps with them. My ADHD, it feels like every time I'm talking to someone or trying to do a task, there's like 4 threads running through my mind, and I have to focus on this one at a time and really hold on to it, or else like I'll start thinking about something else, like start talking about a completely unrelated topic, and it's difficult to like really rein in on that. And that's another reason why I burn out, because I also feel like I'm kind of fighting with myself sometimes. And for autism, it's just, I feel like masking's a good word for it. Like, I do feel human emotions, and like I do feel happiness, but like I have to like put on a smile sometimes because I don't understand some of facial and emotional cues. So like if I say something reassuring with a blank face and like a monotone tone, I don't immediately realize what kind of effect that can have on a person. So I have to like kind of nuance my voice to, as well as my facial expressions, to work well with that. As well as, I completely forgot what I was going to add as well with it. Oh yeah, no, and I just completely don't understand sarcasm. So sometimes people will be joking with me with something and I'll take it as serious, and they'll have to be like, oh, no, I wasn't being serious about that. So definitely affects me in like social situations as well as productivity.
Wow. Yeah, those are things I wouldn't have thought of. Is there, kind of going back to what we were talking about just a couple minutes ago, with regard to just the vast amount of things that we could be consuming, I think the ADHD, and I'm obviously not saying that you're saying this. I know it is a clinical thing for a lot of people, right? But do you feel like there are environmental factors that exacerbate the sort of inherent ADHD that's already there?
Absolutely.
In modern society, it has to be.
Especially when places are too loud for me. Like, I hate going to the stores because they're blasting music and I just get sensory overload so quickly, and I have to like immediately leave. I do have like a shelf life in stores, because even at school sometimes when it gets really crazy and people are like loud in the hallways, sometimes I have to just like dart through, and then someone will grab me because I'm a recognizable face on campus. So I then have to talk with them because I don't want them to feel bad. And then, it's sometimes so overstimulating.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my pet peeves is televisions in restaurants. Which some restaurants you go into, and it doesn't matter what seat at the table you pick, there is a television.
See one, yeah.
And I have a very difficult time not looking at a television, even if it's a sports game that I don't care about at all. No. It's just, you can't help. The eye is just drawn to it. I don't know. It feels like the cynic in me, when we talk about this in class sometimes, and I feel like it comes back to that inputs thing, like some... I think it's scary for a lot of people, myself included, to be alone with their thoughts a lot of the time. And so it's easy, because there are so many different things we could allocate our attention to. It's so easy to, when you start feeling that existential dread, whatever form it may take, it's just, let me just watch this video to distract me.
Bury it under the video. Like, it's like almost hypnotizing. It like, forget about all the pain on the inside. Focus on this external reward pretty much.
Yes. And I feel like that's, for me, what was so sort of traumatic about the pandemic is that we were all, there was a meme, like, can you imagine if this was happening before the internet? Because seriously, thank goodness for the internet, during that pandemic. But at the same time, I think one of the reasons why the pandemic was so traumatic is that, we were all stuck at home. And yeah, you could watch Netflix all day or whatever, but I think it did give us, because it forced us all to stop, I think it did force us all to be alone with our thoughts a lot more than we were used to.
Absolutely.
Which was really just sort of overwhelming and dreadful.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly, I think.
For me, it really made me question my identity, I think, in some ways, because you can't see your friends, can't see your family members, can't go see your students, and it's like all these things just got eliminated, and it's like, well, who the heck am I without all those things?
Yeah, no, absolutely, because I'll go back to the masking things. Like, I use so much. I have to be a certain person for so many situations, but the moment I'm just left with myself, I'm like, who am I? What do I want to do? And then it spirals then there, and it can get very bad sometimes. So, like, luckily, I was able to, like, kind of connect with my family a little bit better over the pandemic, but every time I was alone, it was not great, to put it lightly.
Yeah, it was pretty dark for me too for a while there.
It's wild because one of my friends was like, "Nah, the pandemic was great. I gotta sit on my rear and play games all the time," and I was like, "Not me, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like, that's a bright side to that." But me personally, it was like, humans are kind of social creatures, so even though I am an introvert, I do kind of need that social interaction sometimes, which is interesting.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Having lived through it now in retrospect, part of me is kind of like, I wouldn't mind shutting down again for a little while. Maybe we just shut down society just for like 2 weeks every year.
Yeah, no, because everyone thought it was going to be 3 weeks initially, and then nothing came back, and it was like...
Yeah, I remember thinking, I hope this doesn't extend into the summer, because, I want to do summer things with people that I care about. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know, man. But here we are, and the pandemic's over now, so... All right, I think I've got just about everything here. Are you the president of SGA?
Yes, I am.
Way to not mention that.
Sorry, I just... It's weird, because, It's so weird, because I don't initially open that up because I know... It's weird because I sometimes feel like I'm bragging, but I really am not. So it's weird because I like people to know that as a resource because I know a lot of things about the campus, but I don't want to brag about it. It's weird because I think I'm bragging about it whenever I mention it, but it's really not. Like, if you know the full story about it, I was like kind of the only one there. So
yeah, I know what you mean because I was I did 2 years as the president of what was then called College Congress. And it's hard not to say I am the president of X without feeling a little braggy, but it's also just a statement of fact. Somebody has to do it.
Oh, no, 100%.
Do you like that position?
I do because it allows me to help a lot of people, and it's weird because even though I feel like I keep on going back to I'm an introvert, but I like helping people and I like getting a little bit of social interaction. So it's rewarding, absolutely. I definitely, when I go to a 4-year, I'm probably going to take a semester break from doing this kind of stuff because it is overwhelming at times. So I'll probably need a recharge before I do it again, but I'll probably end up doing it again in a 4-year.
Yeah. The recharging, I think, is crucial because I also relate to being an introvert, but it's a sliding scale, and depending on the context, like obviously I'm not really introverted in the classroom, as you've seen. Because I thought, I'm sure you could and do it well, but for me to teach at my best, I definitely feel like I need to switch on a different part of myself. And after those 75 minutes, I definitely come in here and close the door and
it's just like, okay,
stare at the floor.
Yeah, no, the floor is the best place. I prefer the ceiling. I'll lay on the floor and look up at the ceiling.
Lying on the floor is underrated, if you ask me.
I love it.
Yeah, a lot of support having the whole earth underneath you.
Oh, yeah.
Hyrum, before we go, I asked you to prepare a recommendation for the listeners, something you feel like everybody should check out. Do you have a recommendation for the listeners today?
Checkout threw me off, but I definitely have like a thing. So I struggle with it quite a bit, but I ultimately decided that this world, there's a lot of choices you are pressured to make, essentially. every option there. Even when you open up the internet, you have the option of go to Google, go to images. And the thing I want to say is don't judge yourself based off the choices that you don't make or can't make. Just make the choices that you do count, essentially. So if you want to do this, but you need to do this, you need to realize that you need to make that choice count. You need to do the thing that you need to do, because down the line, doing the thing that you need to do will allow you to do that again. It's even though you take one road, that doesn't mean the road doesn't loop back.
Absolutely, 100%. I'm going to let that stand for itself because it totally speaks to me, and I hope it speaks to the listeners too.
Thank you.
Hyrum, thank you so much for being here. It was great to get to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. It was great to talk to you too.
And thank you, everybody, very much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please do tell somebody else to listen to it. That helps us out. And until next time, thank you all very much.
Have a good day.
You have Game Master, Dungeon Master, Game Master?
Yes. I use Game Master over Dungeon Master for a reason.
Yeah, we don't say Dungeon Master anymore.
If we do say Dungeon Master, it's just I said Dungeon Master to a friend that doesn't play Dungeons and Dragons, and they thought an entirely different Dungeon Master. I
see.
Yeah.
People are into what they're into.